the ancient Greeks and the ancient Nordic peoples, if they would even so much as need to build a bridge over a river, they would build it in the least obtrusive way possible and, sincerely pray to the river gods, asking for forgiveness for building that bridge.
Yeah.
How far have we come from such a thing? And really, one of my beefs with the perennialists is when they claim that all of our problems are because of modernity and Cartesianism and all of this stuff, when the reality is, the roots of every single problem we have today actually goes back to Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition. Whether you're looking at Max Weber's Protestant Ethic, Spirit of Capitalism, or Maxine Robinson's magisterial book on how, Islam led to, capitalism and industrialism, the fact is that monotheistic Semitic religions are actually a depraved kind of perversion of the original religious spirit.
Well,
I wouldn't call it depraved.
I don't agree with you, but at any rate.
Yeah, I don't like depraved. But they have, there's a certain weakness that they have based on the posited distance between us and the divine order. And, the Native Americans would say, walk gently on grandmother earth or something like that, just like the people cautious about building bridges.
Well,
and we don't have that yet. Especially from Genesis, saying that man should have dominion over the earth, which people promptly assumed meant dominate everything on the earth. There are certain weaknesses or opportunities for error, I think, in every religion, really. But I think when you look at the Western civilization's problems, it comes from primarily Christianity and you could say it comes primarily from Abraham if you really want, but
it may come from the misinterpretation of Christianity. It doesn't come from Christianity. I don't think you can attribute it to the tradition and that problem.
It doesn't come from the truth of the religion.
Well, what else is the religion but its truth?
No, wait a minute.
Not everybody gets the truth.
Well, I would say there's more wisdom in a single maple leaf than the entire Old Testament. And Christianity is interesting in the sense that there's not one Christianity, there are two Christianities. There's Greek Christianity and Semitic Christianity. And, Greek Christianity contains some truth. Semitic Christianity, which is essentially what Protestantism is just an aberration. It's, legalistic, law-bound, and soul-destroying.
They've basically forgotten the New Testament. A lot of these people, they'll still quote it, but their sense of everything comes from the spirit of the Old Testament, the laws for everything.
I've heard of the distinction made between Pauline Christianity, based on the writings of St. Paul and the Gospels, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that what when you refer to Greek Christianity, is that the same as Pauline Christianity?
No. I would say that first off, take the New Testament, separate it from the Old Testament. There were early Christians that believed that the Old Testament was abrogated by Jesus and that it has no part in the religion of Christianity. Secondly, that, considering that the old religions were forcibly destroyed in the cultural genocide of Christianity and the Roman Empire, a lot of Western Christianity adopted the forms of the ancient traditions, and things like the communion are not Judaic at all. They're thoroughly pagan, and that's a good thing. Those things,
they don't feel like they're Judaic in origin.
No, all of the stuff that modern Christianity is trying to get rid of, the ceremony and whatnot, is actually great. Unfortunately, they're trying to get rid of everything that's good and preserve everything that's bad. You know, there was one paragraph that Pound wrote that I thought was amazing. He said, you know, it's a travesty that they're trying to get rid of the Latin Mass. He's like, I have no problem with them doing the Mass in other language, but let it be in Chinese or in some other language with high register and, you know, that's deeply tonal and musical. But for God's sake, don't put it into modern day English.
People doing it that with Chinese because even most of the Chinese wouldn't understand it.
I think that was part of his point.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at modern Protestantism, the problem they have is they don't want anything to get in the way of what they want, including scripture. And it's they've got this, you know, weird idea that it's up to them to create the kingdom of God, and that even Lauren Boebert is talking like that, and that really, to me, shows just how far things have fallen.
Well, and then, you know, I've read descriptions from people that said that they understood more from a Mass in which they didn't understand a single word, but where there was beautiful ceremony.
Yes.
That was acted out like a play, really on a microcosmic scale, where the entire cosmos was, you know, basically acted out within a single room, than they did from one of these ultra mundane modern masses where they could understand every word, but there was no heart behind it.
Yeah.
I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, that's one of the nice things about the Eastern Church, is they still have the magic, even if they're less. They may be less and less in touch with it, but they still have preserved it. I mean, on the individuals may not be as much.
If you go to the monastery to get to attend the service, it'll be in Greek. If it's the Orthodox monastery, it'll be in Aramaic or Arabic. If it's one of the Syrian Orthodox.
Well, depending on the congregation, because, you know, I attended an Antiochian church with someone else for a while, and it was mostly in English, but they had hymns that they sang in because they were in the Midwest and were really the only Orthodox church in the region. They would have you know, some of the musical things be in Greek, Russian, or Arabic.
Yes,
which I thought was a nice touch.
Most of my daughters are both choir directors for Eastern Orthodox churches, and they do the services, the singing in Greek.
Yeah, I was there trying to sing Greek and Arabic and everything, and having trouble with their transliterations, but it was great. It was, you know, they preserved a lot of beauty, and that's the one thing that proves the falseness that lies within Protestantism, is the fact that they don't have any sense of beauty, and along with that, no sense of the sacred.
Right.
That's
I think that was one of the main things. They threw out everything like that.
Yeah, they threw out the baby with the baptismal font.
Yes.
Well, they actually kept the baptismal font, but
at any rate, I don't think. I think some of your objections are more have to do with the misuse of the tradition than of the actual tradition itself.
But people will do that.
Well, no, they will. They'll do it in every tradition. In fact,
yes, they will.
Yeah, they'll do it in every religion. It's just that if the tradition is, intact, then, there's a little bit of resistance to the disorder that can come from that.
And don't get me wrong, a lot of the clergy throughout different periods have been terrible and corrupt, but the absolute worst thing that the Christian religion could have done is handing the Bible to a bunch of ignorant people and saying, "Here, interpret this for yourselves."
Luther didn't realize the damage he was doing. Wait, it wasn't Luther. Luther kept it in German, didn't he? But it was still the vernacular.
It's still the vernacular, but Luther, I think, was relatively well-intentioned. But
I think he
after
was.
him, the proverbial shit hit the fan.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I think Luther was the first crack in what the pre-Lutheran church was, and
I think
I have a high opinion of Luther, but I think what he did was one step in the downward direction, even though he was very well intentioned, and he was objecting to real abuses.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Luther did was he caused the Counter-Reformation, which in fact cleaned up a whole lot of the problem in the Catholic Church at the time.
Huh. Well, I don't know about that, but I can certainly see that.
Well, there was a lot of corruption in the Catholic Church at that time that he was objecting.
Yeah, there was. The selling of indulgences and all of that. His criticisms were, for the most part, quite on target.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. His criticisms were quite on target, and if there never would have been a split, and some of his better ideas would have been taken to heart, and there would have been a kind of internal revolution, and the baby wouldn't have been thrown out with the bathwater, right. I think there would have been a much better result. But I think what ended up happening was both sides ended up worse.
Yeah.
It would have been good if there were overtures between Luther and Orthodoxy, and it would have been I think a good solution if in fact the Lutherans had become one of the groupings of Orthodox, similar to the Greek and the Russian and the Syrian.
Yeah, I'm not sure that European mentality could really do that. Possibly over a long period of time, but I don't think they could have switched over.
I personally like the work of Gemistos Platon, who was an Orthodox thinker during the Renaissance, who did everything within his power to try to revive the ancient Greek religion and ancient Greek gods, but yet to still keep a place for orthodoxy. I think that would have been a fantastic thing if it were to happen, but unfortunately, all of the powers that be fought against him and burnt most of his writings.
What a surprise. That's what they do.
So is there any interest in the question?
I don't think God had given up on the Western Church. He wouldn't have sent a St. Francis.
Yeah.
Well, we're pretty far from St. Francis.
Well, we have a Pope Francis now.
Oh, I see. Oh, no. I see. The Western,
yes. The Francis that led the people away from a lot of the problems of the.
Yes, I agree. this particular Pope is the best thing that's happened to the Catholic Church in a while.
There are Protestants that have said wonderful things like William Blake, but none of them claim to say them as Protestants. It's not that, they're Protestant thinkers, poets, or theologians. There are, however, certain Catholic thinkers, such as, Saint Francis or Richard of Saint Victor, that are, or John Scotus Eriugena, who again was considered a heretic, who have gone so much against the grain, but yet basically reinterpreted the tradition in the light of the true inner meaning of the tradition. And so their works still exist. And for me, the tradition still has a meaning in the context of their life and works. But what exists today in any one of those traditions is almost completely dead, in my view. There's very little life left in any of these traditions other than some texts from hundreds or thousands of years ago.
I'm not going to read from it, but I would suggest that you read chapter 8 in the book, What Does Islam Mean in Today's World, by William Stoddard. And he goes through numerous of the traditions and their communal attitudes and the civil wars that have gone on between them for centuries. Now then, so I think we may be concentrating here on Christianity, but I think the problem is the problem of communal thinking, which is merely the traditions acting like in states.
That's good for them.
And that's the primary problem. And it's a problem that has increased steadily since the 18th century.
And now, is increasing, especially here now.
Yeah, and right, especially now, here, every place in the world, between the Hindus and the Sikhs, between the between the Muslims and the Hindus, between et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you can find this problem, and I think it's a problem of the latter days.
It may be. It certainly is. We've always had, strife between religions and things like that, but
I think
a lot of it originally, the religion was pretty much bound to the geographical region, and so it wasn't clear cut whether it was religious or political or fighting over resources or whatever.
Politicians like to use the religion.
They sure do. They'll use anything.
So that's where the confusion lies there. They wish to operate politically and as a state, and the religion is to become the support of that.
Well, yeah, or an element of propaganda to get you on their side.
Right.
I think I don't know if everybody has heard my account. I'll tell it quickly. But one day, when I was talking to Ralph Nader, which was the only day I ever did, I bemoaned the fact that, the Western systems and things like that were just sort of steamrolling over the traditional world, and that it, just looked like it was inevitable. It was just going to flatten everything. I can't remember. I must have said, I'm not sure I see a way out. And he said, well, there's always Islam. He said he thought that might be a force that could resist. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't know.
That might be the reason for the way it's formed.
Yeah, but I just thought, here's a thoroughly modern man involved in politics. Of course, I think he's Lebanese. originally, or his family is. But I did not expect to hear that from a Western politician.
Right.
So was his family Muslim, or?
I don't know if he came from the Christian part of Lebanon, or I don't know what his family history is. I guess I could look it up, but
Yeah, we could look it up.
but he obviously had a feeling for what Islam was and had seen it up close. I thought that was nice.
Mm-hmm. It's a good story.
It's enough to make you want to vote for him. which I only did because I was in Indiana and I knew it. I wanted to endorse what he was saying, but I didn't expect him to win anything.
So is there interest in the questions? We got through absolutely none of them last
Really?
time.
There was none of them? All right, well, let's take a
None.
peek.
I blew the last one by misreading it. I thought it was mediation, but it's meditation.
It's all right.
It's all right. But it's still there, and we can address it in its original form.
Yes. It hasn't been transubstantiated, so it's is there a form of meditation that you think is particularly valuable, but which the Tariqa doesn't integrate into its practices? If so, could it be integrated?
Yes.
Yeah, depending on what it is, but I think just pure silent meditation is very valuable. But I think it's important that you always have the sense that the name is lurking about. But I think silence gives you the opportunity to see some things that might get drowned out by, a vocal or even strong mental invocation. But I wouldn't jettison the name. I would just, sort of like keep it close, but go for silence, which is a name of God.
As far as the name, I think that is an essential aspect of Islam.
Well, yeah, it is. You can't get rid of it.
I don't think you're going to be getting rid of it and still have Islam.
No, you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of diminishing its value. I think if you consider what it's stated to be and what it is the central aspect of the spiritual practice of Islam.
Yes.
I think that would be a really bad move.
Well, I'm not saying to get rid of it. You could approach it by saying, what's there between each enunciation of the name, and you don't want to throw the name out. I mean, I find it comforts me whether I'm consciously invoking or not. It's always hanging around these days.
Well, I think one mistake there is, of course, it considers Islam as being some monolithic thing, when really, in fact, your spiritual practice will be largely governed by whoever your spiritual master is.
Yeah, but
and that will not be dictated by some official organization like the Pope.
Oh no, but the point is that there is not only one way to pray. I mean, if you can't invoke simultaneously when you're doing the ritual prayer, I don't think there's any fault in it. Could be spiritually beneficial to try to maintain that awareness of the name throughout.
Well, there are
even in silent meditation, you don't have to lose the awareness that the name is hanging about. Remember, the name has a visual form. It doesn't have to be auditory all the time. And there are some things you will only see in complete silence.
Well, let me continue. You can go from one tariqa to the next, and you find different versions of song, of the name, and of the various formula, and then you find different versions of the Hajj, the way you dance, and so on and so forth. So that you might say there are all of these are forms of enhancing meditation.
Well, and they're even, they're even a kind of invocation to the extent that they are manifestations of the connection between man and God. But strictly speaking, you can't get rid of the name of God. It is God's name. So I'm not advocating that. I'm just, silence is golden. So is the name. But, there are different experiences. And there's also a sense of the difference between, what is it, Kyoriki and Jiriki? What do they call those two things? Internal and
yes, one external? Is self-power and other power.
Yeah, other power. And I think there's something about the invocation that you can feel like it's self-power because you're doing it, versus the kind of openness that's easier to witness when things are really, really silent. But, you can always think of, the name being on your breath, which I do, but it doesn't have to be vocalized. It can be silent. It can be silent and mental. It can be the kind of thing like you're aware of, like the sound of the air conditioner running. I don't mean to trivialize it by saying that. I just mean that it's always in the background. And there are times when in terms of spiritual practice, you bring it into the foreground. But one of the things you can learn from silence is that the name is never absent.
So I heard you, Sheikh al-Bashir, say yes at the end of the statement of the question. Could you elaborate it?
Yes, I'd like to open this up a great deal, because I know in many ways what's wrong with the tariqa and what's wrong with other spiritual forms that I've seen and experienced. And I know that because I've talked to a lot of people who are either lost or frustrated or don't know what to expect or don't feel like they're getting anywhere, and so forth. And I think as I've examined the problem, I think it's very clear. If you look at the religions, one of the things that has made the religions effective and terribly durable over millennia is that each religious form addresses the entire person, and it provides objects of worship for the sentiments and doctrines for the mind and physical practices for the body and community involvement for that expresses charity, which is of course a lack of personal ego. All of the religions in their full practice and in their mysticisms require those things. Mm-hmm. And today we've gotten to the place where the tariqa, you've heard them say in the tariqa, we're not interested in service, we're a janana, we're about knowledge. And that's bullshit, because no practice is about one thing. And if we are going to progress on the spiritual path in our knowledge of ourselves and of God, we need to do it with our whole person. And that means we need to have objects of worship for the sentiment, rituals for the body, charitable practices that efface the ego, and doctrines for the mind.
Yeah.
And to the degree that we don't have those, we need to find them, and we need to find them for ourselves, because that's what it takes. We are whole people. And throughout time, the religions have expressed this very clearly.
Right. And different ones have made one or the other as a starting point, or slightly high profile, but
and not only that, but there are individual differences.
Yes.
And there are people who are drawn to a genetic path, but that doesn't mean they don't need a bhaktic element.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's
so,
like a nutritional deficiency.
Exactly. Good description.
You need a balanced spiritual practice, not just a balanced diet.
That's a balanced spiritual practice. Yes, I like that.
Yeah,
balanced path.
So, Here, what do you think about this?
Who were you? What did you say?
I just asked you what you thought about this question.
Oh, well, it was just interesting to hear the summation of what was wrong, which makes sense. I've always reverberated more with the bhaktic aspect of things anyway. So I certainly agree with what was said about what was needed for the whole person.
Yeah, that's hard to dispute, you know, given that
it's hard. Yes, it's hard to dispute, and it's clear. Well, why aren't people doing it?
I don't know. You're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your mind and all your heart and all your strength. That kind of sounds like those three things.
Yes, and one of the reasons people aren't doing it is they don't have a guide or a leader or a sheikh or a bishop or whatever who says, you must do these things. And let me counsel you so that you can get the right mix for your particular character, path, situation, and so forth. But the right character, the right mix will include all of the elements, certainly in different proportions.
Yeah, you don't want to go to the gym and just exercise your biceps. You know, you do want a balanced approach in a lot of areas, and certainly in spirituality, which is supposed to be all-encompassing. Why be stingy about this part or that part of yourself and getting involved?
Yes, well, there's no reason to other than there are subjective affinities with certain things, and in many ways different shapes and contours of characters, character, and there really are bhaktic types whose path needs to principally be a bhakta, but it must not include or exclude these other elements, including the mind.
And if you're a particular type, you may find yourself not quite comfortable with some of those other elements.
There's a great learning in there.
Exactly, and you know, avoid the subjectivity of saying they don't attract me, so they're not important. You don't know if they're important or not until you do them.
Right, exactly.
So I was thinking when Siddhi Talha was talking about silence as a form of worship, I thought many years ago, just going to a majlis, you know, it starts off with the mudakara and then the weird, the liturgy of the weird, and then singing, and then a hadra, and then the hadra ends by everyone sitting down, and you have somewhere between 7 to 8 minutes of total silence. And I thought that silence, I mean, as I recall, we're instructed to silently invoke Allah or La ilaha illallah if you're not initiated, but the silence is really the climax of the entire liturgy. And I can't think of any other group activity I've been in that had silence as the final sort of supreme element of it.
Yeah, and it's almost the most intimate part of the majlis. That period of silence is part of the majlis for being. The rest of it is a kind of doing.
I think Islam would be more interesting if all of the 99 names were recognized as different deities, and that people had little statues to them and prayed before them.
Well, even without that, some attention to other names could be a way to sort of activate the part of the soul that maybe isn't getting the attention or giving itself as much. And you could have people could invoke one of the names and sort of try to be aware of its qualities. That's kind of like the themes, really.
Yeah, very much like the themes, looking at the different facets and aspects.
And in fact, with the themes, you can see, the first two as being on the level of action, the next two on the level of, emotion or the heart, and the next two, on the level of intellect. And that's that tripartite thing that seems pretty universal. But you can divide the names up in that way a little bit too. So if there's a particular flavor of that's what the masters there do. That's not for me to tell you. You get the idea.
Question 2.
Well, no more discussion on this. Okay.
I mean, I don't think we actually answered the question.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. I think a lot of you are in your comfort zone and talked about things that you like from meditation in the Tariqa, but haven't actually mentioned things that are outside the Tariqa that are different forms of meditation that you think could inject some more life into the Tariqa.
The comfort zone trick.
Name something that would qualify.
Inquiry.
Yeah.
Introspection and inquiry.
Inquiry being what?
Meaning what?
How is it you know something?
Yeah, that kind of thing. And also, are you experiencing, what is it you're experiencing? Is it the thing itself, or is it what your mind tells you it is?
And how do you really know anything that you think?
Yeah, exactly.
Anything.
And a self-observation, it's a kind of introspection. It can be active or passive. But, if you don't understand the way you work, you're going to misinterpret a lot of your experience.
Not only the way you work, but what things really are.
Well, yeah, that's tricky.
As far as I'm concerned, all of those things are already open to you. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I guess that's why I'm a perennialist, but I don't have any problem reading Sri Ramana Maharshi and understanding what he's saying and to incorporate that in my meditation in the same way that Sri Shankaracharya. I don't know. I don't see the closure here.
Because the question is, do you really know what Sri Ramana Maharshi was saying? Do you have an idea about it, or do you have
that's why I'm meditating about it, right? And that's the whole point of meditation, is to come to understand it.
What do you mean understand?
Well,
Grasp.
What do you mean understand?
Well, then what? How do you expect to incorporate this to
What do you mean incorporate?
That's what you said. I'm just using your words. I'm asking you what you mean by it.
It means to get it.
I don't think I used that word incorporate.
Well, what is it that this question is asking? Is what form of meditation that you think particularly valuable, but which
I said inquiry.
Okay, and I'm saying, what meditation am I limited from?
It's not. Inquiry is available all the time.
Huh?
Inquiry is available all the time.
Well, that's right. So what? So where is I don't see where the limitation is here. You have to explain to me what particular form of meditation is not in there, and I don't see where you find it.
Because I think that what you're getting from your meditation is a conceptual understanding. Oh, he's right about this. Oh yeah, those two things make sense. when you put them together. Oh,
And
yes, that's right.
Even they're beautiful.
Yes,
Well,
and
show
even
me-
they're beautiful.
Show me different.
What does that tell you about the deepest part of yourself? The fact that you can come up with a concept that's logical or is beautiful or expressible.
Judgmental statement about me, not anything based on any reality that I realize.
That was the generic you, not personal you.
Yeah. It's not that none of this is personal.
None of this is personal.
I think, you're exactly taking this exactly where I wanted it to go, Sheikh al-Bashir. In fact, I just read this biography of a famous concert violinist, and at the end of her life, she said, every error that I ever made in life was because I thought of things too intellectually, but lacked introspection.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Here,
And I think the tariqa tends to be very cerebral, very much in the head. And I think if I were to say what the tariqa desperately needs is an injection of non-Aristotelian logic, some mandalas, some cones, some whatever it might be from different traditions that get one outside of the realm of logic.
And outside of your own personal rut, everyone has one. There's no non-rutted person that I know. Certainly not me.
And yes, and as you say, outside of the realm of logic and outside of the realm of conceptual answers about things.
Yeah. I have a little note up here on my wall that if I'm lucky, I might notice once in a while. And it says, your love of comfort is killing you. And, I think that can be generalized. If your comfortable mode is in the realm of ratiocination, your love of that comfort is a limitation. It's a fence you're putting around yourself, not intentionally, but
who's doing that?
Good question.
Good question.
That's the question.
Yeah, when you talked about needing a mandala or a cone or something, I just thought when I joined the tariqa, I bought an image or got an image of the divine name in some Moroccan style and framed it. And I remember Dr. Nasser Sheikh Hussein saying, now don't put glass over it because it has a kind of divine presence. So it was, hang it in front of your prayer space. So it's not like reading or there's nothing intellectual about it. It's
right.
It's more like it's a sacred symbol that you're prostrating in front of. So there's that element of recognizing something that's non-intellectual.
Right.
Yes.
It's a part of it.
It has a kind of immanence. Don't put it on the other side of the window by putting the glass over it. Don't keep it outside.
Yeah, allow its presence to be with you.
Right, up close and personal.
I think we could all benefit from doing a bit of study of the Chinese written character, and thinking less in terms of the way we do here and more in terms of the representational way that pictograms put in front of us.
Yeah, they allow a kind of non-linearity and simultaneity of elements that you don't get so much with linear beads strung together, language. But and that can be beneficial. But there are all kinds of things that may open you to different aspects of the divine reality. And I know I'll never get into the Chinese characters, but I agree with what you're saying.
Well, that goes back to my point about the whole person.
The whole person, yeah.
And I never learned Arabic. So if I look at Arabic calligraphy, I just see symbols that I understand to be sacred, some of them, but there's nothing intellectual about it.
Oh no, you never learned Arabic? You're doomed.
I've never learned Arabic. I have a great deal of difficulty doing so.
Oh, it isn't easy.
Anyway, and that
we'll let that be an example. The Arabic is beautiful.
Yeah, and you could just to listen to it, even if you don't understand it. I enjoy that.
And you know, one of the things that our language tends to be is very abstract and very methodical.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is useful in the idiom grammatic method of ancient Chinese is how synthetic it is, and how everything is based on concrete images. So for instance, the pictogram for the color red would be a combination of the 4 pictograms of rose, cherry, iron rust, and flamingo.
I think that's 5, but that's all right.
No, iron rust as one word.
Oh, well, maybe I counted the syllables wrong. Well, and not only that, but the thing, to put something together the way, two concepts or more can be contained in a Chinese character. And somehow the meaning is in their interrelation. The Western languages, almost all languages really, they unfold in time, so that by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th element that's painting the picture, the first one, has sort of faded out, and they can be simultaneously present.
Well, generally, the Western languages are not pictorial.
They're what? No, they're not. No, not at all.
No, they are.
They're representations of speech, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to do.
They're representations of sound.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all right. I mean, obviously, both forms of language work, but there's something about visual that I don't benefit much from, because I'm not that much of a visual person. But I do recognize that that vision can take in an entire picture all at once. And mentally, or in linear language, you have to describe it. You have to put together the image rather than see it all at once. And those are 2 different forms, and they're both valuable. And but you see, do Chinese think in images? I don't know. They probably think in sounds too, but
I would think, but interesting question.
Yes. Can you think without language? Can you see your mind doing anything without words? It's,
I don't know.
It's good. Well, see, there's a challenge. There's something to see that you haven't seen before. That's silent meditation allows you to see that kind of thing.
That's an interesting thing to think about. If you raised children in isolation, exposed only to ancient Chinese and ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, would that impact what their metaphysical perception of reality would be later in life?
It quite well might. I don't know.
I think so.
It wouldn't surprise me if it did.
I think modern Western and Eastern languages, for that matter, are inherently geared towards technical precision, and they're very much languages of engineering rather than art and lived reality. And so I think that from the day we're born, we're almost being pushed into a specific mode and manner of thinking.
I think you could grow up in a beautiful natural setting in a different natural culture and still learn a linear spoken language.
Of course, but when you are exposed to modern language and you're raised in a big city and you go to modern school and you have a cell phone put in your hand by the time you're 6 years old, it's less and less of a chance to actually break out of the mold.
But I think the connection between the two goes both directions.
Right,
because,
right.
Our particular technology we've developed is in fact a manifestation of this kind of linear thinking. There are occasional inspirations and things like that come.
Linear thinking.
Well, I mean, this and that, therefore this. I mean, logic to a certain extent, and description.
You could have a linear thinking that was pictorial based, so that it's.
Yes, you can. Yes, you could.
You can connect it with a particular language that way.
Yeah, Egyptians maybe had that. You said,
but the spoken language is unfolds through time and necessarily.
I've been dwelling on your question, Siddhi Taha, about can you think without using language, and I remember some dreams because when I wake up, I can remember bits and pieces of them. Some of them pretty in more detail, but some of them just bits and pieces because what was going on in the dream was similar to things that maybe I've experienced in the waking state. But I know there are other dreams when I wake up. I know I was dreaming, but I have no concept or recollection of what I was dreaming. And I thought recently, it's because they pertain to some reality which is simply not available in the waking state. I think maybe it's a form of thinking. Dreaming may be a form of thinking, but it doesn't involve, English.
No, not. I mean, there's a lot of imagery in it, and sometimes you don't know. You're not sure about your dream because it's the kind of thing that's just hard to put into words, and it may other times be impossible to.
Yeah, it may be a form of reality that we just don't see when we're awake. But, we don't experience.
Right, and the Irish philosopher John Moriarty says that we really need to learn from various native peoples, such as the Aboriginal Australians, because in the dream time you would have something called non-representational thinking.
Yeah, that must be that may be what we're trying to get at.
That sounds like a description of what I'm trying to talk about.
Inshallah, in maybe our next session or the one after that, we'll have someone who can speak to us about the Australian Aboriginal tradition.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Philippa, right?
Philippa.
Yeah. I remember reading, I don't remember who it was, not an unknown author, writing about the Aboriginal dream time and what it means to go on some of those walkabouts, and it made a big impression.
Well, this one friend of mine who passed away a couple of years ago, James Cohen, was an Australian writer who happened to work for a number of decades as a pilot in North Africa. And basically, when asked what his religion was, he said, well, he's a Sufi, he's Orthodox Christian, but at the same time, he's an Aboriginal Australian.
Well, he certainly had integrated a number of different possibilities.
Well, integration, I think, is a good thing. I mean, right now, we're sunderers. We're really good at separating things.
Yes.
And a lot of what is talked about in circles of religion and philosophy is, oh, look, we're this, not this. We're this, not this. Rather than coming together through different forms of commonality and, you know, being under that big umbrella, we try to separate each from one another over some really silly and petty things. I mean, if you actually look to why the Orthodox and Catholic Church still have not reconciled to this day, it's over basically the filioque clause, which is just completely insane that you have a schism because of basically one or two words.
Yeah, it's they care about it. They care an iota about that.
What is that? What are you talking about?
My understanding is that the difference in the, you know, saying that the Spirit, no wait, how does it go? Descends from the Father or something like that. And the Western Church wants to say from the Father and the Son. And grammatically, the Latin is, you know, like there's a suffix, the word that ends with an I that makes all the difference.
Right. So yeah, exactly. The Orthodox would say that the Spirit descends from the Father, and the Catholics would say the Spirit descends from the Father and the Son.
Does that sound right to you?
Which is an innovation. And
I just want to ask Sidi Daoud, because he knows an awful lot about Orthodoxy. Does that sound right to you?
It was, I forget the Pope that was still using the creed without the filioque, and he was condemned for it.
Yeah, of course.
Used in the Western Church the way the Orthodox do now, and the Orthodox are very resistant to any kind of change.
Well, and that's a change that I think they're justified in holding to the form.
My feeling is that without the filioque, you have a much broader expanse of the action of the Holy Spirit. And that means that the Holy Spirit can be found in any tradition, whether they have Christ or not.
Good point. Yeah. I think it's that determination to make, to separate the Father from us by interposing Jesus. And naturally, of course, that is in fact, you know, a legitimate way to view things personally. That,
well,
you know, Jesus is the intermediary, but not for the Spirit.
I think the filioque clause was driven by politics.
It could have been.
I think it was to elevate Christ.
It was, obviously.
In an argument point against every other tradition. So it was an effort in communality.
Yeah. It's a doctrinal expression of no man cometh to the Father save by me, that's improperly understood.
Right. I mean, it's definitely, in my view, a doctrinal error. And I think, you know, the entirety of late Catholic theology, you know, from Aquinas down, is wrong. And the Catholic theologians that are closest to the truth, like Eriugena, actually sort of dismissed these errors. But it's sort of besides the point, because, you know, what I was saying is we need to get away from thinking about all of this too logically and separating things off, and sort of just come together and say, you know, these are just logical constructs. The logical constructs are not as important as experience and practice.
Yeah. When we want to understand something, we analyze. We have so much analysis, but we don't have enough catalysis.
Well, I mean, think about it. You've got, you know, Aquinas's Summa Theologica, or you've got, you know, all of the works of Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd and so on and so forth. But how much true wisdom does that give you? On the other hand, you can look at a couple of pieces of Zen koans, the Buddha's a dried shit stick, or certain haiku from the Chinese and Japanese traditions. And you know what? There's more wisdom. I'll say it right now. There's more wisdom if you contemplate and are introspective and think about these things in 4 or 5 or 6 lines of those bits of poetry than in all of Western metaphysics combined.
Yeah, if you can penetrate it or absorb it or be absorbed by it.
I personally, you know, I don't take anything with too much credence until I can feel some heartfelt divine presence in it.
Yeah.
All right. And that's, so I don't pay much attention to those things that like that. I just don't, you know, if I come to the point that it moves me and I feel the spirit, I feel the divine presence when I say the prayer, the dhikra, well then I don't worry about it.
No, why should you?